All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Excited to be with you once again for another episode here as we cover, of course, the Iran-Israel-US conflict. And as I said earlier, guys, there's a lot of angles to cover. So today we're gonna be covering the fake, I will use the term, the fake ceasefire Mr. Trump has announced. Which, by the way, do you know, Elizabeth, it collapsed within the hour.
Yes, it sure did. And I think the real question here is, everybody thought that the United States entering the conflict was going to be sort of the deciding factor between
Yeah.
whether, Israel or Iran was going to come out on top or what was going to happen. All of a sudden, US President Donald Trump came out and said, well, there's a ceasefire. And then immediately, neither party listened and both parties broke the ceasefire.
Yeah.
So it really calls into question how much power does Donald Trump have here? And he is very frustrated and definitely feels like an absolute fool.
Yeah.
And we have a video of him basically saying as much. As we dive a little bit further into the real question being, how much influence does the United States actually have in this conflict?
Yeah.
Or is something else happening? Who really has the power here? And the big question is it Israel or Iran even who is wagging the United States? Is it the tail wagging the dog, or is it the United States really causing this? And there's a fake facade of ceasefire.
Indeed, well, that's what's going on because it became clear. And as I said this at the beginning, I said if the US keep going on this trajectory, it will be the final nail on its coffin. And it looks like we are heading out in that direction because Iran now is realizing, despite what you hear, Iran is having the upper hand. So, as a matter of fact, I just saw this morning they bombed Israel even more. So this is why both Israel and the US now asking for a ceasefire. It's not asking ceasefire because they care for the regional security. They're asking for ceasefire because of where they didn't expect the response from Iran. And like I always say, Iran is not Iraq, Iran is not Libya, Iran is not Syria, Iran is not Somalia. So they both finding out, and especially after what Iran did yesterday with targeting the US base in Al Udeid in Qatar. That just it's, as I always say, the optics of it on international relations, on the global stage.
And now we have a wonderful sponsor, Giant Mining, who sponsored all of the shows this week. So let's hear from them, and a big thank you to them, because without our sponsors, we couldn't do this show. So let's hear from them.
Big thank you to today's show sponsor, Giant Mining Corp. Without our sponsors, this show wouldn't be possible. Copper shortages just went political. Washington's eyeing import tariffs, and the scramble for homegrown supply is on. Prices are brushing $4.85 a pound, while global stockpiles sit at a 15-year lows. Enter Giant Mining Corp, advancing the 9,800-acre Majuba Hill project in mining Red, Nevada. Recent drilling caught a 170-foot zone averaging 0.4% copper, crowned by a 10-foot streak at 4.4% grades that the majors pay billions for. Independent engineers at RASPC are already modeling the first resource estimates. So Majuba moves while rivals wrestle with the new red tape. Speed wins the super cycle, and they are built for speed. Dig deeper at giantminingcorp.com or on the OTC at BFGFF in the US and BFG in Canada. Remember, there are always risks in investments, and there are no guarantees of any kind. Always do your own research.
Oh,
All
there
right.
we are. Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering where did you go? So anyway, we are we're gonna delve deeper a little bit now into really what this. I'm gonna use the term a fake announcement because to me as an American, I look at this as an insult. Literally, it's an insult on all of us for a lying president to come forward and just issue statements right and left without even knowing what he's talking about. And that's to me was like because right as I said earlier, right within the hour, that announcement
Mhm.
fell flat on its face. That's why he was so frustrated during his brief interview on his way to Marine One.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's hard to even know what to share with you guys first. So I'm gonna share this Truth Social post. The ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it.
Mm.
Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. Okay. Okay, so he put out a ceasefire. He also said a couple of other things that I'll show. And then let's talk about what happened immediately after this happened. David, do you have kind of a breakdown of who did what when immediately afterwards?
Well, actually, both Israel and Iran continued to exchange some sort of the fire despite Donald Trump's ceasefire declaration,
Mhm.
because the Israelis have announced, and this is the defense minister of Israel, has sort of ordered now the Israeli army, to respond to Iran sort of launching of a missile. So, and that's why the air raid sirens were really sounded in northern Israel. So, and this was about morning our time, 10:30 a.m. So,
Mhm.
and this was in response. Here is where the kicker. A lot of people always jump to conclusions quickly. Well, Iran violated. Well, hold on a second. It's because this Iran's action was in response to what the Israeli military said was some sort of attacking a location inside Iran. So basically, it's tit for tat. But the key to all this is that both countries, both Israel and Iran, disregarded what the President Donald Trump is saying. And that tells you right there where the U.S. is right now, not only on the in West Asia or Middle East, that is, but around the world as far as its sort of its status. It's gone. We done with that because we don't have any credibility left whatsoever. So.
Well, and I think that point that you're making actually really is the point is, the United States, I think
Mhm.
even before the US got involved with the bombing of the more or less empty nuclear facilities that had already been bombed,
Yeah.
but before that happened, before that even came into the picture, everybody was really concerned about, is the US being played by Israel? Israel is really trying to drag the United States into
Mhm.
this conflict. And with sort of the impression, and this was actually this is very similar to Ukraine, where Donald Trump came into office and he said, I'm going to stop when he was campaigning. Of
Yeah.
course, when politicians campaign, I think number one, it's full of whatever they think people want to hear. And
Mhm.
then second, I think they don't really know what they can or cannot do, because the president is not the end all be all, right? We heard that interview with Vladimir Putin earlier in the week, where he was basically talking about, the three US presidents that he's been through.
Yeah.
When they come into office, these guys in dark suits basically come in and tell him, hey, this is what you're actually going to do. Sorry if you wanted to do something else, but you can't, right? So he doesn't actually know what he's going to be able to achieve or not. But I can tell you, Donald Trump has a massive ego, and he looks stupid right now.
It
For
does.
him to have come out and said there will be a ceasefire, this is a ceasefire, and all his big talk about how he had this huge win by bombing these nuclear facilities that more or less is like nothing.
Yeah.
Now to say, oh, there's a ceasefire, and then have both sides ignore it is really something else entirely, and it makes
Yeah.
him look really stupid.
Yeah. Well, it became clear actually to both Israel and the U.S. now that the sort of they bite off more than they can chew on,
Yeah.
because I think, and it's not I think, it's becoming evident and clear. It became evident that they didn't expect the response from Iran, and Iran wasn't bluffing. So when they said, and I did a video yesterday, I talked about the possibility of Iran targeting the Daimona nuclear reactor in the Negev desert.
Yeah.
In addition to the US bases. At that time when I was talking about this, I said the possibility is there. And before you know it, by the end of the day, they already attacked the Al Udeid air base in Qatar. So the idea for this is that Iran is following through with what it promises to do. And second, if they don't do that, the regime will risk the anger of the Iranian people. Because one thing this has done to the Iranian society, meaning the bombing of the nuclear sites and the attack by Israel, what it did was it united the entire Iranian society.
Sure did.
Yeah, from all walks of life.
Did.
They put in their differences aside and they put in the country first now. That's why there was that big banner. I still remember. I should have kept the picture. I might do it tomorrow. It says right there, "We are all soldiers of Iran." And that to me is loud and clear. So the US now is finding out, and that's what convinced me personally that Donald Trump was pushed into this decision.
Yeah.
He was forced and pushed into it. It's no secret, guys. We all know the influence of the lobbyists, the Jewish lobby in Washington. It's not a secret. That's how it's been in charge of the US government, including members of Congress. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the interview that what's his name, Tucker Carlson did with Ted Cruz. By the way, Ted Cruz doesn't represent me as a Texan.
Oh,
we don't give a damn for that guy. Anyway, when Tucker asked him, he said, "Do you know what the population of Iran is?" And he said, "No, I don't know." And I was like,
"What?"
Yeah, that's why he said, "I don't know." And I was like,
"That's ridiculous."
He said, "You advocate
he didn't know
in Iran, and you don't even have any understanding. And why are you advocating to support Israel for this? Is it our war?" And Ted Cruz was like, "Well, how do you know what the population of Iran?" Asking Tucker, and Tucker told him, "Yeah, it's about 92 million people."
Yeah,
and he was like, "It just shows you. It shows you who is in charge of our corrupted Congress." And this decision by Donald Trump now, or the announcement rather, it just fall flat on its face.
So do you guys want to see it? I might have to. He said he drops the F-bomb.
Yeah.
So I may, just for YouTube's sake, I may I don't know, bleep out that part or something. But let's stick him on here. And this is a very, very frustrated President Donald Trump this morning. So this just happened.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck. And that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to go back to that picture. Just freeze it there, Elizabeth, if you may. If you can, please. Can you tell us exactly about the body language right there?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of things. So first of all, I think it does not require a body language expert to tell that this guy is really pissed off. You see the downward turned mouth. Look at how narrow the eyes are right here. He's really, really, and he knows he looks like an idiot, which he does. And so let's look.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so.
Okay, I want to particularly look at the narrowing of the eyes. Now, granted, it is very light outside, so that is a factor. But look at how pulled tight his face is. And I know, guys, it's a little bit grainy, but look at how pulled tight his face is. This is a genuine reaction, and I think that this is one of the first genuine reactions we've actually seen out of Donald Trump this entire time, because Donald Trump is very good at he's very good at talking on the whole teleprompter thing. He's really good at blustering. He's really good at basically acting like he's the best thing since sliced bread. This is probably the first honest thing we have seen out of him maybe this entire presidency, and it's how much of an idiot he knows he looks like. But yeah, his body language, absolutely. His hands are down. There's absolutely no power in his posture whatsoever. He looks very angry and frustrated, and this is a genuine reaction, and it's one that I think he is quite embarrassed by. So I honestly kind of appreciate this, because it's the first genuine thing I think we've seen out of him this entire presidency.
Well, it becomes clear. I mean, when you realize you are not even in charge of a decision such as this one, to go and bomb a sovereign nation. I have nothing against Iran. Why will I dislike the Iranians or the Iran regime? I don't care how they live their lives. They didn't bother me here, so I won't bother them over their country. So who gives us the right? But now this, as I said, and I am convinced about this, Elizabeth. I've been around long enough to know how things are in the Middle East, spent time on the ground, been there, dealt with some of the entities in certain Gulf Arab states and so forth. So you kind of develop the understanding over the years as to how they behave and how they manage their internal and even external affairs. So suffice it to say, within this context, is that now Israel is coming forward, because here is what they are saying. They are saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we are not going to attack Iran again.
Yeah.
This is what they stated right after Donald Trump's sort of a statement. So, and that came from the office of the Prime Minister. Netanyahu is, by the way, as you all know, he is wanted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, for war crimes in Gaza. Now, this leads us to really one key question to ask.
Yeah, and nobody's talking about that, by the way.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
That's not a well-known thing here.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. How come we are talking about the ceasefire between Iran and Israel? We're not talking about ceasefire in Gaza. Why is Gaza's not taking sort of, because it's still, if only people know what's still going on in Gaza. So why aren't we talking about that one? Why isn't the president advocating for also a solution to the Gaza problem?
Well, I mean, I think the honest answer to that is that Iran has powerful friends.
That is true.
Doesn't.
That is true. And here's the thing. Remember, all this that's taking place right now. We're not even talking about the involvements of Hezbollah. We are not even talking about the involvements of the Houthis yet. Yeah.
Well, and here's to hoping we don't, because I do. So let me share this really quick, David, and let me get your opinion on this. Okay. So this is another option as to what happened. So let's see. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So this has been passed around the internet. I don't know how accurate it is or not, but I'm very curious what your take is on it. So it says, senior Israeli official, Trump called Netanyahu and asked him not to attack Iran at all. Netanyahu told Trump that he could not cancel the attack and that some response was needed to Iran's violation of the ceasefire. Ultimately, it was decided to significantly reduce the attack and cancel the strike on a large number of targets. Do you think this is a possibility? Is that more or less, because one thing I have noticed about this is that the responses back and forth have actually been very measured. It's still obviously like soul crushing and heartbreaking that anybody is passing away at all, that these attacks are happening, but they could be much worse. And even in the case of the United States, Donald Trump basically, when he bombed these nuclear facilities, he more or less did very little damage. And so not no damage. And obviously, the bunker busters are really big, powerful weapons, but he did, there was very little in terms of casualty, in terms of really damaging anything. If you look at the pictures, the buildings that are above ground are still totally fine. Like no damage, it looks like, has occurred to them. So as we're watching this back and forth, do you think it could have been worse? And this is more or less kind of a theater show? like more or less kind of a playing it out on the theater of the world stage?
Yeah. I will go with that assertion. It's because the Israelis is not going to ask Trump for whatever. They're going to move forward with whatever they want to do. Do you think usually what they do, and it's always been the norm regarding U.S. Israel relations when it comes down to certain aspects of this, including assassinations, usually the U.S. will be informed of some sort, one way or another. Israelis do not come forward all the time, and that's just the norm of how things are done. But usually, at least during my days in Washington, there was a close relationship between the Mossad and the agency. So the three-letter agency, that is. But for this one, it's slightly different. And it's because Israel understand that it got itself into some major possession that is a conflicting one, because Iran is not holding back. And once Iran found out that they could really penetrate the air defense systems, they moved to the second phase of the type of missiles they were using. Remember, the 19 waves of missiles. Yeah, 19 waves. As a matter of fact, Iran launched so many missiles, but the first wave of those missiles were the old models. Then they moved into the slightly upgrade. They didn't use the top notch of all this one here. So, and Israel didn't count on that. Even the U.S. didn't count on Iran to follow through with its threat that it will target U.S. bases in Middle East. And that's what it did in Ubaid was a symbolic. Of course, they didn't. Nobody was killed. They targeted just the infrastructure, the basic stuff. But to Iran was just a message, no more, no less. And I feel it will be the same way they're going to do with the Strait of Hormuz, should that decision is made by the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. If that decision is made, in my opinion, what the Iranians are going to do, they're going to shut down the Strait for about, let's say, probably 10 days, no more.
Sure.
And the reason why, because the world can maintain or sustain the economy for at least 10 days. But to Iran is the message that they're sending. And the message is, hey, if we can shut it down for 10 days, we can shut it down for a month.
Right.
That's the way I see this play out. So, of course, Iran had to send a message to the countries in the region that are hosting American bases. Because when you think about this Al Udeid air base in Qatar, it's almost like 10,000 troops of American soldiers on that territory. Where is your sovereignty? I always look at it like the example of U.S. forces in Ramstein in Germany. It feels like we are occupying those countries, because here is the question: Do we have any foreign country that has bases here in the U.S.?
No.
None. Exactly.
Nope.
That's my point. That is my point.
Yeah.
So Iran saw this one as it's now or never a message sent to Qatar, even though it was a phone call made the next day from the Iranian president, Pezeshkian, to the emir of Qatar, Tamim. And he told him, hey, don't take this personally. This was aimed at the U.S., not at the Qatar, because Qatar in itself has been calling for, well, we need to come back to negotiations. We need to condemn what Iran did. What Qatar didn't do is they didn't condemn what the U.S. did. That's, you see, with that double standards of even Arab countries. I don't trust them. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but as one who speaks the language, understand the culture, spend a lot of time, you can trust those leaders. I don't care who they are. It's just the way it is. But to me, I look at it as Iran sending a message, which they already did. Because remember, they only sent one missile into the base in Iraq. Only one. Again, it's just a subtle messages. And the U.S. didn't expect that response.
Well, and I think that that's a really important piece to pay attention to in this whole conflict is, everybody's really concerned about World War III breaking out. And that's, of course, a concern, right? But it has been interesting to watch how this has unfolded, because it has, there has been measured approaches here, even if it looks like, and that may change, right? That may absolutely change as this progresses, but it does seem like things could actually be quite a lot worse than they are right now. And I hope that cooler heads prevail. I hope that there are conversations behind closed doors. And I hope that this is coming to a close, because this is fundamentally very unpopular. Here in the United States, it's very unpopular. Some people are saying, oh no, and I saw a poll that was like, 9 out of 10 Republicans think that Donald Trump bombing these nuclear facilities was the best thing ever, and they're so supportive of it. But, I don't know who trusts polls anymore, but I certainly do not trust polls. Polls said that Kamala Harris was winning, and the whole thing. Right? So I don't trust polls. But fundamentally, even if you are a Republican and you do really think that the U.S. entering this conflict is the right thing to do, the United States can't fundamentally afford another war. So it's if you don't have the resources to go into war, you can't go.
And the other thing is that countries have now realized that you don't have to fight the Americans directly. This is why I was in Iraq, and we kind of saw what happened. We couldn't defeat the militias in Iraq. We couldn't defeat those groups in Afghanistan. We couldn't defeat those in Somalia. And the recent one, the Houthis. I mean, all this gives you an idea as to it's not about the countries understand. All you need to do is drain the resources of the Americans. So as we call it, the war of attrition. And that's exactly what Iranians already calculated this. And Iran's sort of influence in the region is very wired. Their intelligence services, they are very, very wired, especially when you consider about their besiege force and how much they are entangled within the region. So the idea that the expectation in Washington was, oh, we're just going to fly our B-2 because it's massive and all that, and all of a sudden country is going to cave in. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so, let alone for a country like Iran. And this is one of the things that I wish Donald Trump will have someone who can at least advise him and say the truth and say what he needs to hear. Because I am convinced that Mr. Trump has no idea about the history of the Persian Empire. And of course, that history, that's what shaped what Iran is today.
Well, and that's the thing. And I think that's fundamentally true. I mean, Ted Cruz not knowing how many people lived in Iran, that I think the politicians really don't know. And I remember at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict, most people, including politicians, couldn't tell you where Ukraine was. Much less why they're entering into a conflict with Russia. And so there really are some very intelligent people that are probably in some form of shadow government now. And it doesn't have to be like, God knows I love my conspiracies. Okay. I love my conspiracies, but it's not even a conspiracy. You've seen throughout history, policies have remained the same. How long has this issue with Iran been going on? We've watched Iran be, about to have the nuclear bomb for as long as I've been alive, for longer than I've been on this planet. We've watched that same narrative pass throughout history. And so it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. You can look at the evidence. You don't have to believe, you can look at the evidence. The evidence is that the policy tends to remain the same through generations, which is kind of wild to me. But you watch it be the same. So somebody else is in charge of what's happening here fundamentally. And, if you were Iran and you had this rhetoric basically against you for decades and decades and decades, would you not prepare?
Yeah, for sure.
And so it seems like you're correct. It seems like they did, in fact, prepare. But I am really hoping that because this has not spiraled out of control, that there are some cooler heads that will keep it under wraps.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not-
but the message from Iran, this is nothing but just the beginning.
That's the message, but how much of it, and this is, this is a question I don't have the answer to, but how much of what is being said has to be said
Yeah.
to maintain how a country or a government looks to their own people and on the global stage, right?
Well, it becomes
They can't just say like, oh no,
yeah.
of course, we're never going to do anything again. We
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah, but it will become the information warfare as far as who's saying what, and
Yeah.
that's the idea. So, to me, if I am to think outside the box and say what will Iran actions moving forward will be, the two things that comes to mind quickly is that, first of all, a decision will have to be made about withdrawing from the NPT once for all and be done with. And so, because that's it, there will be no guardrails that would prevent Iran from moving forward. And second, they're gonna move forward expeditiously or in a lightning speed as far as developing their nuclear technology, whatever way you can
buy it. Or just buy it.
Yeah, there are countries will be willing to sell some of that, but this in itself will be, because like I said, and I am convinced about this, I just feel so strong about it. By doing what we did, we put the final nail on the coffin for us and the partnership that we have with Israel in the Middle East or West Asia. So it's going to be now the Arab countries will be looking from the sideline because they are pathetic. They can't do anything. Suffice it to say that Iran is going to emerge as the major player in the region, despite what Israel has, nuclear or not, because Israel will be forced to come forward now and declare that it has a nuclear weapon, which I don't see them doing that at all. They won't do it. They want to maintain that policy. So it will be interesting to see how this is going to move forward. I'm going to be talking about by the way, guys, if to those who wants to join me later on the other channel, I will be talking about the attack on the Al-Udeid and what it means from a geopolitical and security perspective in the region. The key thing we need to keep in mind, which we will talk about, Elizabeth and I, tomorrow, we're going to be addressing the role of Russia.
Yes, hugely.
Very, very. Yeah. A lot of people are starting to question. I am one of those. Started to put a really question mark about the commitments of the Russians towards the Iranians. So we don't want to say much till tomorrow. So we're going to be talking about that one. So make sure to join us tomorrow. And by the way, please make sure to share this video with others and subscribe if you have not.
And in 30 minutes, go over to Geopolitical Trends, and David will be doing a live stream to do an even deeper dive into
I will do that. Let's say
hey, we got a super sticker.
Yeah, we want to say thank you because we don't want to miss like what we did with Kevin Baptist. I still feel bad about it. So Kevin, if you're hearing, please just accept our apologies we saw that to the last minute. So DTGOG, thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope to see you within 30 minutes or so. And tomorrow we will be talking about Russia's role into all this. So, as always, we enjoy being with you. Please drop us some comments and remember to subscribe. See you guys.